Good morning, good morning. Nice to see everybody. We'll get started in just a few minutes, but give everybody a chance to enter the room. How's your day, Lynda?
It's going pretty well. It's a little gloomy outside, so that's nice. It's easier to be focused when it's not beautiful outside.
Yeah.
How about you?
We had some sort of windstorm here,
Oh.
and my power went out for like 5 hours last night.
Oh gosh.
There's all these downed branches, and the wind is still kind of roaring. It's our version of winter in California.
Storms on every coast. It is rainy over here too.
I'm ready for spring, for sure. Ready for H-1B season. Well, how about we get started?
All right, let's do this. Sophie, you can take.
I'll take over while you go ahead and read the
Right, there we go. Let's go ahead and read our disclaimer as soon as my screen loads. There we go. All right, and you have the screen. Okay, welcome everyone to part 2 H-1B lottery fiscal year 2024. Thank you all for joining us today. Give me one moment, please. I'm having a few technical difficulties.
I mean, basically,
yes,
it's recorded. You'll all get a link. This isn't legal advice. If you want to talk to us, contact us.
Yes, an educational service provided by Alcorn Immigration Law. This information is discussed as an overview only and should not be construed as legal advice or for you to take any specific action on. Please be sure to consult a knowledgeable professional with assistance for your particular issue. And now it is my pleasure to introduce you to our CEO and founder, Sophie Alcorn, and our expert immigration attorney, Lynda Hagerty.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alex. Welcome, everybody. It's lovely to see you all here today. We are very excited to present this webinar on getting ready for H-1B season. We're happy to take your questions, and the best way to ask them is using the Q&A panel in Zoom. And when you do that, you should have the option to be able to either use your name if you would like or anonymize yourself. But often the names show up, so just be prepared that that's not really a confidential forum. So we're going to be talking about the H-1B lottery, what's ahead, getting set up, how we can support you. And really the main thing that Lynda and I need to communicate with everybody on this webinar today is that although theoretically you may believe you have more time based on the government deadlines that we'll share, if you want to hire us, we have very limited capacity to only accept a few more cases like imminently. So if the result of listening to this webinar is that you think you want to hire Alcorn so you can work with Lynda and our team to do your H-1Bs and the lottery this year for you or your team, please let us know like today or tomorrow so that we can make sure we have the capacity to help you. Exactly. So with that, and we'll talk more about, you know, what that means and why and what we do and how much time the government gives you and what things are looking like for this year. But I normally save anything that's like about hiring us for the end, but since we're so close to our internal deadline, I just really wanted to get that out of the way right now. By way of background, I'm Sophie Alcorn. I'm the founder of Alcorn Immigration Law. I'm the author of the TechCrunch Dear Sophie column. And we really love helping rapidly scaling startups and founders and investors and growing teams and technology and other types of companies to successfully navigate the US immigration system and obtain visas and green cards. And we welcome you here today. And I'm joined by my amazing colleague, Lynda Hagerty, who's our Chief Legal Officer at Alcorn. And it's really our main go-to for all things H-1B and H-1B lottery. She's an expert with tons of experience in business, immigration, and a focus on early stage startups. So thank you so much for making time in your busy H-1B schedule today to join us, Lynda.
Thank you, Sophie. I'm happy to be here today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So if you would like to work with us, if you're new to Alcorn, our mission is to overcome borders, expand opportunity, and connect the world by practicing compassionate, visionary, and rigorous immigration law in service of the betterment of humanity. And our goal is to help you accomplish your immigration objectives together. So we focus on winning strategies, creative and novel legal arguments, helping early stage companies that may only have a few employees or maybe even pre-revenue to establish all the legal requirements to get these approvals for key, urgent, and important early stage hires that are necessary to the growth and scaling of your technology venture. And we really get how challenging and scary and annoying the US immigration system can be to navigate. And so our goal is to make it as easy as possible for you, as clear as possible, which is one of the reasons we do these educational webinars. So if you like it, you can you can subscribe to our newsletter, and we do a couple of these every month, different topics. I think these statistics are old, so we need to update them. I would say that probably our H-1B approval rate is now like 99.5% or something.
I would say that's accurate too. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Sophie.
Yeah, I think this was from the Trump administration when it got really hard. But I think it's actually much stronger now, and we really try to help, especially early stage companies, just put everything forward clearly at the beginning to minimize the chance of any requests for evidence. And in addition to our corporate practice, we also offer various other types of visas for multinational businesses like the L1 and investment into the United States like the E2, or extraordinary ability for startup founders, the O1. So if you need information on any of those, you're also welcome to reach out to us. This is another one that needs updating because we were in the Los Angeles Times yesterday and the Wall Street Journal the week before. One of the things that we've felt very fortunate to be able to support with is in the realm of laid off tech workers, helping people, educating people on how they can maintain their status in between H-1B jobs, helping startups with runway and capital to be able to hire and sponsor brilliant tech workers who happen to have been laid off. So that's been featured a lot in the news lately. Okay, so and I see the questions starting to come in, so thank you so much. We'll absolutely get to those as we hit the relevant topics, and we'll also save time for any additional questions at the end. So first of all, why the H-1B? Lynda, as you work with our startup clients, and some of the reasons are listed here, but what are some of the most common reasons that like people ops or HR or CEOs might be looking at the H-1B lottery and putting people in it right now?
Well, I think it's a very sort of long-term secure pathway for a worker, a professional worker, and it also provides a lot of opportunity to pursue a green card because H-1B workers can have what's called green card or immigrant intent. And even if you're in the green card process and the green card process just drags on and on, if you're in H-1B status, there's even provisions where you can extend that H-1B essentially while you pursue the green card, even if it takes 10 years. So it's a very, preferred status for foreign workers for sure. And, you've got to look at that lottery the first time. Once you win, you only have to win once. and then you've got it and you can transfer it to other employers. So it's very valuable.
Yeah. And sort of this need has fluctuated in and out over the years with the Trump administration, and then the pandemic, and then the rise of remote work, and then the Great Resignation, and then the layoffs. We've had so many tidal waves of changes in tech and immigration in the last few years. But the consensus I'm starting to see emerge is that even for remote or distributed teams, some amount of in-person synchronous working is really important for that geometric growth of the company's product. Like for building, if it's all asynchronous and on Zoom, there's missed opportunities to really accelerate what a company can do. And so some of our startups are looking at bringing people to the United States so that they can be in a similar time zone. So it's easy to attend quarterly team on-sites in different locations throughout the United States. We can get H-1Bs for people to work from home, and not everybody has to be in the same part of the country. So that can be really helpful, especially when like, there's a lot of tech contractors from Ukraine who, had to look for safe places to live. And so, there's a lot of brilliant engineers in emerging markets and countries, and they might not have that same quality of life, peace of mind. And so this can be a really wonderful tool to helping retain talent long-term and setting people up for success.
Absolutely.
A lot of our companies have also hired recent graduates from US colleges and universities who got their F1 visa, and they had OPT and STEM OPT. And so it's really great when employers can put those people in the lottery even before they graduate and every year until they get an H-1B. If you're working with engineers from Canada or Mexico or Australia on some sort of special visa and they want green cards, the H-1B can help make it like a very safe stepping stone for them. So there's a lot of reasons why people might want H-1Bs, even startup co-founders like the CTO, if they're in like the Philippines or something, you could get your co-founder an H-1B to come here for the first time. So there's a lot of ways to use it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the immigration context, we chatted. Okay, so the H-1B is a visa. It's valid usually in 3-year increments, initially a little bit less, and typically up to 6 years total. If your company starts the green card process for a person and they're waiting for their green card, they can potentially stay on the H-1B longer. If you're a company and you sponsor somebody in the lottery, you're not for an H-1B, you're not required to sponsor them for a green card, but it can be a good best practice for retention to offer that step later. And Lynda, companies can set the milestones, right? Like we see different companies wait different amounts of time or for certain milestones to start the green card, right?
Exactly. So, they may have an immigration policy, or even a new startup might just decide, we want to wait 6 months or 1 year just to make sure we want to make that investment in pursue the green card.
Yeah. And on the flip side, we had one early stage stealth mode startup. I still don't know what they did, but they basically sponsored the same Stanford postdoc for the H-1B lottery and a national interest waiver green card and a perm all at the same time because they really needed him here because whatever he had invented was essential for the success of the company. So it really just depends. These are tools. You can access them. They can be helpful. If somebody wants to get citizenship, that's they're on their own. Companies are not involved in that process. And you could also start the green card process for somebody abroad if they don't get into the lottery. There might be certain countries where it's doable in a couple years as opposed to decades. So that's another option. We mentioned students currently in the United States. They're typically on F1, sometimes on J1. If you're thinking about putting somebody on a J1 into the lottery, it's a little bit more risky, right? So Lynda, I would want somebody to talk to you before making that choice.
Yeah, definitely. It is a little bit risky. There's implications for travel. J1s don't have sort of immigrant intent. H1 kind of shows some of that intent. So,
Mm.
and there's also sometimes a 2-year home residency requirement that
Right,
attaches to a J1.
right.
So we've got to sort of navigate through those issues before we would,
Okay.
decide to nominate someone for an H-1B if they're a J1.
But if a student's in the US on F1 about to graduate and or maybe they have OPT or STEM OPT, we put a lot of beneficiaries like that into the lottery. So it's a very solid use case.
Definitely. And because it's a lottery, your odds could be 30%, 40% any given year just based on demand. So most employers really try to put that F1 OPT student in the lottery as early as possible in their, OPT career. Sometimes they haven't even received the work authorization card yet, but they have a job offer and the
Yeah.
company's sponsoring them in the lottery.
And the lifetime odds of somebody getting accepted, I think if you put them in the lottery every year, and let's assume they have like a 1 in 3 chance of getting selected in each of the 4-year chances, I think overall they would have about a 60% chance of getting selected. That's what a math person told me. But if anybody wants to help us run those statistics, I would love to do that. Okay, and we touched a little bit on green cards. Let's see. Okay, so let's go into a little bit more of the basics. How do you describe, just like Lynda, what's an H-1B?
Yeah, so an H-1B is really a professional work visa. I mean, the baseline requirements are you have to show that the job requires a bachelor's degree in a specific field of study. So it's a specialty occupation is how it's defined in the regulations. There's some individuals might have that clean bachelor's degree and aligns perfectly with the job. And then sometimes we can be creative and we can draw in experience with their education to show they have the functional equivalent of a bachelor's degree. So
Yeah.
those are kind of the key sort of things that we have to look at initially.
So it's kind of like it has to be professional, maybe that would be one way to put it.
Yeah, exactly.
And we've still gotten it for college dropouts or people who never went to college. So we have ways of proving it. And then there is and this ties into one of our questions. Candace asked about the prevailing wage requirements for the H-1B. Is there a minimum salary requirement even for a startup founder applying for an H-1B when in the first years of the company? So here we write, the prevailing wage depends on the geographic location of the work being done. Lynda, in general, what is the prevailing wage aspect of an H-1B?
So typically we go to the government's wage library. It's called the OES wage source, and they have it broken out into different occupations, 4 wage levels, and then it's also geographic by county. So we kind of look at those 3 variables and we can assess what the prevailing wage is for that position. Sometimes, the wages are out of whack. I would say that's only 4 wage levels, but if you look at, professional private surveys out there, you might have 7 levels or 8 levels. So we do have the option of looking at private wage surveys. We know which ones have worked with Department of Labor. They have to meet very specific standards. So that's sometimes a creative solution that we have to explore.
Yeah, and so this kind of ties into the question, the factors for the wage, the company has to pay the wage once the H-1B is approved. So if the H-1B is in process or you got the visa approved, but you haven't activated the status yet because you haven't come in here on an H-1B yet, you don't have to pay it yet. Whenever somebody's in H-1B status, the company does have to pay that prevailing wage to comply. And it has nothing to do with the size of the company, if it's early stage, if you have product market fit and revenue, if it's for a founder, it's all the same. So whether it's Cisco or the early days of a YC startup, you still are looking at, okay, what is the job classification? Where is the person working? And what level are they at? So that is something we work with our clients on, because sometimes it's like, oh, CEO in San Francisco makes $260,000 a year, or whatever, right. And then founders are like, well, we were budgeting $65,000 so that I can eat ramen.
Right.
So, yeah, but that's something be super happy to talk about. And there might be good changes on the horizon for H-1Bs for founders coming up this year, where the government might ease some of the requirements for an employer-employee relationship. But right now, the way it stands is you have to show that the company's offering you a job, they can supervise you, and somebody can fire you. So we have to make sure that we set everything up in a really compliant way. Okay, and so the reason we have this lottery is because Congress passed a law that said that there are 65,000 new H-1Bs every government fiscal year, which starts on October 1st, and an additional 20,000 for people who got their advanced degrees, master's degrees, and PhDs in the United States. And it fluctuates. We're super on pins and needles to see how many people will apply this year. We have no idea because of layoffs. But it's probably a great time for small companies to do it. Last year, there were 483,000 registrants for the 85,000 spots. But in years prior, it was more like 200 or 300,000. So I don't know. Do you have any
I wish I
ganders?
had a crystal ball, I mean,
Yeah.
I agree with you though, with the layoffs and what we're seeing in the market, I would expect that you'll have higher odds this year. So it's definitely a great opportunity. The other thing I always tell people is that advanced degree, it's any US advanced degree. So let's say you earn a US degree in geography, right? A master's degree, but you also have a master's in computer science or just a bachelor's in computer science. We can take that higher degree, even if it doesn't relate to the job, and use that to qualify you for the US master's cap.
So let's say it's a software engineering job. The person got their master's from Slovakia in computer science, but then they came here for like a 1-year geography master's, and now they're being offered a computer science job. They still get that US master's cap, even though their geography degree isn't related to their software background.
Exactly. Yeah.
Genius. Okay, great. Okay, and so this is kind of relevant too for companies looking at sponsoring for the first time. We talked about this prevailing wage requirement. You have to make a lot of promises that you're not going to adversely affect similar US workers. There can't be any strikes or lockouts. There are requirements to, we call it posting the LCA, which is the labor condition application. It includes a wage range. So you have to make this accessible to your company about the person you're sponsoring. You need to maintain a public access file in case you're ever audited. And in the case of layoffs or termination, if your H-1B worker decides to depart the United States, they can ask you to pay for their one-way ticket to go back home, which we've seen a lot of lately. Lynda, can you talk a little bit about the LCA, what sort of information it includes, and what are some of the most common ways our clients end up posting it?
Sure. So the LCA is the labor condition application, and it's a Department of Labor form that's required as sort of the first step of the H-1B process. And so we have to include data about what the prevailing wage is for the occupation, what the offered wage is, what the work site is, the job title, the company, and there is a physical posting requirement that has to happen for 10 business days in 2 conspicuous locations. So, in the event that, let's say somebody's 100% remote, they're actually posting the LCA at their home in 2 locations. So refrigerator, office bulletin board. I mean, I know it seems a little outrageous, but we just want to make sure that the company is in full compliance. In the days where people are 100% on site, it could be done at the office, or sometimes companies would put it on like their website if they often, had an intranet where they would post similar postings. So
you do need to do it, but we'll walk you through how to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This ties into one of the questions we got. Is the H-1B citizenship blind, or is there a quota based on your nationality or nationalities? So this slide shows us that most of the people in the United States on H-1B happen to originally have come from India or China. There's a number of people from Europe, smaller amounts of people from Latin America and Africa. But the lottery is completely independent of people's country of citizenship and of people's country of birth. So there are other things in immigration law that depend on where you were born or what country you're a citizen of, like your turn in line for a green card or qualifying for an E2 investor visa. But specifically for the H-1B, the only thing that gives you a better chance is whether you have that US advanced degree, essentially. So this is one that is unbiased and non-discriminatory. All right. And okay, this is another important question. And this is based on calendar year, not fiscal year, for those of you who are really into H-1Bs. But since 2019 and 2020, when the government initiated their new electronic registration system, we've seen a variety of lottery practices. And in 2021, there were 4 lotteries. So companies found out if their candidates got selected in March, and then in July, and then in August, and then in November. And it was like, wow, more people can get it. This is great. And so we were completely expecting that would happen last year in 2022. But there was no second lottery in July of 2022. So I think USCIS is getting better at matching up the number of registrants with their, like, the flake rate and how many people apply and how many people get denied. So I think, Lynda, what's your recommendation for this year? If people aren't selected in March, should they move on to other options instead of waiting?
Well, I think just like you said, Sophie, I think the government's improved how they're sort of crunching the numbers. And we didn't see the wait list last year. So I would assume the chances of seeing the wait list this year are probably going to be pretty slim. So we'd say, pivot to looking at your other options.
And we'll have more webinars around early April talking about what those options may be. And if you have somebody for whom you're really counting on this H-1B lottery, it's never too early to talk about backup options, because there may be other types of visas that we can help you set up. Even if your candidate gets selected, they're not going to have a start date until October of 2023. And you may need somebody in the country sooner and working sooner. So we can all, set up consultations to talk about those stepping stones. We see a lot of roles for software engineers, software developers. There's lots of changes, tweaks on those names, but these are kind of the most common ones. Certainly in STEM fields, in management, there's a lot of applications. There's no requirement for that. If you have an architecture startup and you need to hire a bunch of architects that are, they might need a license, but assuming they have whatever is required to practice their architecture profession, they could certainly qualify for an H-1B. Okay, and yeah, I think the wages are changing. And Lynda, actually, that's a question I have for you. I think that wages are in flux because of all of the layoffs. So instead of the Great Resignation, where people could name their price, now it's like a company's market, and people are more hungry for jobs. So there's probably a chance that wages will go down. So if the prevailing wage data is old and too high, can you work with our clients to help figure out if there's an alternative way to position the job or look for a survey or something where the wage?
Yeah, absolutely. So because it takes a while for the government's wage survey to catch up with the real world. We might not see really a dip in the government wages for a couple of years, reflecting what's happening right now. But the private wage surveys are much more sort of current. And I would say they're a great resource if you are having a wage issue, if the prevailing wage seems too high. We can definitely navigate through that. We have a lot of companies that we work with, and there's a lot of options that we can pursue there.
Okay. And when in our process is the right time to start having those conversations about the job code and the wage?
Well, when we take on our registrations, we're doing a preliminary analysis, and we're trying to red flag the cases just so the employer is aware if there is going to be a wage issue. We might not be able to solve it 100%, but we can start to address it and start to look at some creative options in advance.
Wonderful. Thank you. This is a little bit outdated, but I think it's interesting. Amazon, Google, Microsoft sponsor a lot of new H-1Bs, and also there are many tech consulting firms that sponsor these. But look, if your startup has 5 people and this is your first official employee, that is okay. You have an equal chance to any of these of getting, having the option to get approved. We have to do different things to make sure that the government believes you have a real company, but we know you do. We had an RFE once for a company that it was their first employee and they had raised $15 million and it was sitting in the bank, and it was their first, action as a company because the person couldn't work until they got their H-1B. The government was like, is this real? I'm like, yes, it's, fill in the blank of giant, established venture capital firm right here. It's completely legit, but so we're happy to help you navigate that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think people also ask me too. So we just you see those big name companies and, are my odds better of getting an H-1B if I'm working for one of these Fortune 500 companies? And it really is random. I mean, in my experience, even working with those larger companies, their, H-1B cap registration acceptance rate isn't necessarily higher than a small company. So it really is random.
Wonderful. Okay. And then I think this is another interesting trend. Approval rates went really, the Trump administration denied a lot of cases, but the Biden administration is approving a lot of cases. So it's a good time to get approved. So odds are in your favor. Okay, so let's talk about how we start preparing, what we do. We'll walk you through the whole process, including what Lynda mentioned, assessing the viability of you putting a candidate into the lottery, handling the entire registration process, helping you, track government correspondence, knowing if and when you're accepted, the LCA, we include that. We tell you how to post it. We do the whole petition preparation. And I think one of the great things about working with Lynda and our team is we are here to answer your questions along the way. And there's always questions about, oh my gosh, what if I need to travel? Oh my goodness, the company's finances changed. There's always questions, and especially working with emerging companies, often our clients who are tasked with being the point person for their company, like people ops or HR operations, and running the immigration function from a company perspective. We find that a lot of our clients who we work with have people who are new to the process. So we try to take a very consultative and pampering approach. I mean, Lynda, you're
a lot of hand holding.
Yeah, tell them that.
It's all good. I mean, I've had many calls trying to explain concepts and seeing that aha moment, on Zoom, like, oh, I understand it now, so, we'll walk you through it. That's
a lot of it is convoluted, but we can help make sense of it for you.
Right.
Okay. And most of our clients simply retain us now. The lottery registration window is almost upon us next week or the week after, March 1st. And we handle all of those registrations. But if you want to hire us, you need to let us know today or tomorrow, please. And Alex, if you could kindly put our contact information in the chat window with our email and our links, that would be really great in case there's anybody from a company here that wants to initiate any further H-1Bs. The time to let us know is now, please. And let's see. There's another option, but I don't think our clients really need this. When the lottery was new, some people, we just weren't sure about the technology and if it would crash. So some people wanted to hire us to do the full petition prior to the lottery, just in case. But Lynda, could you talk a little bit about the system going down yesterday and what happened and what's going on right now?
Never a dull moment.
Technology.
Yeah. So yesterday, the USCIS H-1B registrant portal was supposed to be open for first-time companies to create, a new H-1B registration portal for their company. And the site simply crashed. So, we started getting emails as the day progressed yesterday. I tried to log in as a company, couldn't get in. And then I reached out to some colleagues and we realized the system was just down. I think it's back up. Don't quote me. We're
Okay.
going to test it out after the call, but I just got a
Okay.
message from someone that it's live. So
Good.
we'll see.
Exciting. Oh my goodness. So yeah, so we've been working on these cases for months for our clients that hired us, back in November or December. So really, if you're thinking about doing it, or you're going to ask your company to do it for you, you really need to get moving.
Yeah, and one thing about this slide, Sophie, like we have had folks before come to us where their OPT is going to expire beginning of April, right? And we want to make sure if they're selected
very
lottery
important.
that we can
Yep.
pivot to filing right away. So that's kind of one of the
That's
exceptions where
very
we
important.
encourage, just being
Yeah.
proactive and maybe putting the petition together. So if they're selected, we could jump right into submission.
Right, because people's OPT doesn't necessarily start or stop in any particular month. And if they're at the end of it and it's cap gap, we really want to make sure that we're on top of those deadlines and they can retain their work authorization and qualify to simply keep working until October. So that's a great point. Thank you.
Sure.
It's wonderful. Okay, so I would say, I'm not even actually sure if we can accept new clients through March 1st. That's an update since we made this slide, a few hours ago. But here's some information. You can contact us, and Alex has the proper information in the chat window. You can call us at 855-546-0015, or you can send us an email at info@alcorn.law. Okay, so let's see. Let's take a look at the dates. We're already in this portal opened yesterday. Maybe that's a sign that there's going to be a high number of registrants, right? The system went down. Who knows? Can you walk us through the timeline for the next quarter, or next month and what it looks like?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're waiting for that. I think it's live, but don't quote me. But now companies, for the first time, so if you've never done this before, the company will need to have a portal, which will eventually communicate with the attorney portal for the submission. But it has to be created, and they're supposed to be opening as of yesterday, but probably today. If the company had a portal last year and the contact is the same, they could just go in and re-access that portal, so it doesn't have to be created. Between March 1st and 17th is when the registrations can actually be electronically submitted. So as the attorney, we're going in and creating these registration records for each company, each employee, and then we can go through the submission process. We have to do an electronic handshake with the company during this window of March 1 through March 17. I think it ends noon Eastern time, March 17th, but so that we're really mindful of that date. And then USCIS is going to notify companies and us of who was selected in the H-1B lottery by March 31st. Sometimes that's earlier, but it's usually around that date. And what happens is we get an update in the portal that says selected next to the H-1B registrant. So the company can access that, and we can also access that. So those will come through. It usually takes about 24 hours for all the registrations to appear. So we sometimes like to wait and give it a good 24 hours before we officially know who was and was not selected.
And how do you recommend that a company tell their candidates if they were or weren't selected after?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I've been doing this for a while, and it can be a really sensitive topic. So my recommendation is, if somebody wasn't selected, we give the company language and we recommend that they make contact with the employee directly. And that's really because that has to be a discussion between the employee and HR. And then we can set up a call and talk about options, but that initial notice should come from the company. As far as employees that are accepted and the registration, what I like to do is reach out to the company and confirm that I can notify those employees directly.
Wonderful. Okay. And, we don't just go ahead and tell your employees, because you as the company need to confirm you want to move forward. And that's one of the things as well. part of USCIS's calculation of how many people actually end up applying, because not everybody, sometimes candidates get multiple offers from different companies, where different companies put them in the lottery. And so if one gets selected and the other doesn't, they might not, be out of there. Or sometimes they get selected from two companies, and one company can't register the same person twice, but one person can be registered separately for two different jobs by two different companies. So there is some strategy that people engage in with that to be aware of, especially if you're new to this on the HR side.
Yeah, definitely. And then we look at the filing date, Sophie. So once,
Yeah.
oh no, that's totally fine. So once, we find out who is selected, then we have a 90-day window to file the H-1B petition, which is nice because if someone's traveling, we can we can delay it a few weeks, we can work around their travel schedule, and we'll talk about travel and H-1Bs in some of the later slides.
And what you can do now, in addition to just hiring us ASAP if you need help, but if you want to do, extra credit, these are some of the documents that you may need in the future if you are selected, and some can just be helpful. So just start gathering these now in your cloud storage platform digitally so that you have them for when we need them. It can be very helpful.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about money and Alcorn's fees and government fees. How much is it if somebody wants to hire us today or tomorrow to do their H-1B registrations?
So we charge a legal fee of $2,000, and that's to enter them into the lottery and do that assessment, collect the documents. And if that person is selected, the final legal fee is $49.50. But if they've paid the $2,000, they're credited $2,000 towards that.
And that is separate from the USCIS filing fees. We include the $10 for the registration, so we'll just cover that for you. It makes it easier. But if somebody is selected, right now, the filing fees are about $1,700 to $2,500, depending on the size of your company. If you want premium processing, and sometimes that makes sense, that's an additional $2,500. It's usually available recently, but in the past, when the lottery was paper-based, sometimes the government would disable premium processing for H-1Bs around this time of year. And there has been notice that H-1B and other immigration fees might increase at some unknown point in 2023. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So it's going to be cheaper this year than next year if you would like to put people in the lottery. Okay. Let's talk about the LCA, and this is the document that needs to be posted that includes various information about the company and the role. Where does that come into the process with Alcorn, Lynda?
So if the candidate is selected and we are going to prepare the H-1B petition, the first step is really this LCA requirement with the Department of Labor. And this is something that we have to submit directly to Department of Labor, but we also have to verify that the company has an FEIN. So we'll ask for that IRS letter that gets issued, assigning the FEIN, and we submit that to Department of Labor through email. They confirm the company is verified, and then we can go through this whole process. So it's a multi-step process, but it involves this posting that we talked about. You put it on your refrigerator or your bulletin board for 10 business days in 2 locations.
And sometimes if it is going to be posted in a shared workspace, people can be self-conscious about the wage details. So, we can talk about how to position it as a range or other options as well.
We could write the salary in words. We can be really creative.
So, premium processing, the employer does not have to pay for it if the employer does not require it. All the other H-1B fees have to be paid by the employer and not the beneficiary. But if the beneficiary wants premium processing, they're allowed to pay for it if it's at their discretion and not required by the company. When are some times that people might add in premium processing for a lottery case?
I mean, I think that travel can become a factor, for folks that there is sort of an exception. Usually you can't travel while a change of status petition is pending with USCIS. So if you're an F1 student and you apply for the H-1B, that's called a change of status from F1 to H1, you cannot depart the US. But there is an exception where if the case is approved, the change of status is approved, there's a small window of time where you can depart the US as an F1 student. If you have that approval in hand, which you would need premium processing for, and then you come back in before October 1. So that's one of the common scenarios where we see premium processing.
And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but maybe, or the slides later, but maybe we should talk about it now. The government announced a pilot program for H-1B and L visa stamping stateside within the United States by mail with the Department of State. So they used to do this back in the early 2000s, but you just like mailed in your passport and it came back with the H-1B visa in it, and you didn't have to go to a consulate or wait for an interview or do all that stamping stuff. So they're bringing it back at some point in this year. That's the hope and plan. It should be available for H-1Bs. Maybe they won't include it for lottery cases. We don't know yet. There's not enough details, but that might be a situation in which it's valuable to get premium processing of like, oh, if I get it approved right now, I can just get the visa all at the same time. And then
Right.
I can really, so that would be amazing. So
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that program rolls out and
Yeah.
if they'll put restrictions, whether it's a renewal, what visa categories. I think there's just a lot of buzz going on right now about what it will look like. So
yeah, but
Steve?
back in like 2004, when we had it, the idea was you could file a change of status with USCIS and include your passport, and you would get both the change of status back and the visa and the passport.
I feel like it was a separate, like it was a two-step
Separate
process, but it was still remarkably fast, like in immigration speed, like weeks, not months.
Yeah. Great. Okay, let's talk about students and timing. And then we'll also get through a few more other questions in our remaining time. So for recent graduates, the timing can be tricky. If we're using, okay, so this comes up mostly with Stanford students on the quarter program that are getting their first master's degree and graduating around June 20th, which is usually when the Stanford graduation is. So we talked about how for some people with their OPT ending, we might want to file as early as possible, but there's other situations where we might want to file as late as possible. So if you need to show that you've graduated with the diploma and transcript showing that you qualify for the master's cap, we can put you into the master's cap before you graduate, but you can't file the petition until after you graduate. So in certain cases, we're like, ooh, we need to file intentionally in the last week of June to make sure that we can maintain that requirement. Can you explain what cap gap is, please?
Sure. So, we talked about students, a lot about F1 OPT students who, let's say you're selected in the lottery and you're at the end of your OPT or your STEM OPT, and it expires after April 1, but before October 1. So let's say you expire June 1st. As long as you are selected in the lottery and you file an H-1B petition before your OPT maxes out, you'll get this cap gap work authorization. So your EAD card gets extended until September 30th with the idea that you can convert to H-1B status on October 1.
Yeah, so that's really great. And somebody is asking who may be looking for that situation. I'm on STEM OPT through June. It's my final lottery chance. I'm curious if I get the lottery and then I don't get notified that I don't get the visa, how long do I have to work in the US or until I have to leave the US? I think they're asking, they got selected, but then the H-1B is ultimately not approved. How long can they stay in the United States?
So F1 students have a 60-day grace period. And in the really unfortunate event where, let's say, the H-1B is denied, the grace period would actually kick in from the denial date.
If the denial date is beyond June when their STEM OPT expires.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. But look, if somebody's in that situation, you could get another F1 and go to a different school. We could help you, try to get an H-1B without the lottery, which we'll have in our, upcoming webinar in April on how to do that. So definitely keep hope alive. There are ways to do it. Somebody else asked, somewhat related, is there cap gap if we are on CPT, curricular practical training?
Yeah, so unfortunately, no, cap gap does not apply to CPT. It's only for OPT and STEM OPT.
Okay, great. Okay, let's get through a few more slides. Travel and filing options. Most of our clients who are in the United States, we still advise if you can avoid travel, it's safer. Just do a change of status, stay tight. It's the smoothest way to do it. Can't work for everybody. But we did get a question about consular processing, which is this slide. Arturo asks, to start an H-1B process, do I need to travel to the USA, or can I start while living in my country without being in the United States first? So what is consular processing?
Yeah, so excuse me, consular processing is essentially the H-1B gets approved or processed by USCIS in the US, but in order to activate it, the individual has to go to a US embassy or consulate and apply for a visa stamp. And then they can enter with that visa stamp and approval notice to be in H-1B status.
So 10 years ago, it was routine for companies to sponsor people in all different countries around the world for H-1Bs. They would get approved, they would get their visa that summer, and they would move here October 1st. That kind of got out of whack with COVID and everything, but that is still a completely possible way to navigate this process. Also related to how you get into H-1B, and I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but somebody asks, if you are currently in TPS, temporary protected status, can you apply to an H-1B? And TPS is one of those like transition statuses. I think that if you had a valid entry and you are maintaining legal status, you could potentially transfer from TPS to H-1B. But if you came in and your status lapsed or you were undocumented and then you got TPS, it might not be possible. So that's an analysis I think we would have to do further in research, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it stems back to whether they entered in valid status and maintained the TPS. So,
and then similarly, somebody asked who's in an asylum process working in a pharma company, can their company sponsor them? And it's a similar analysis. Have they been maintaining status?
Exactly. And I've done that before for TPS folks and asylum folks, actually. So maintaining status, as long as we can show that maintenance of status, maybe you've got the EAD for the asylum, we can do that as a change of status.
Wonderful. Okay. And just keep in mind, if you're looking at traveling, there are consequences, whether it's before your H-1B or after your H-1B. So that's something we would closely want to align on. It's very individual. Depends on what country you're from, where you're a citizen of, where you have residence, if you're in the US, what types of visas you have, how long you've been here. There's a lot of factors. So just talk to an immigration lawyer. Here's a question from a startup founder in Canada who's considering the H-1B to be able to travel to the United States. The company raised funding. They're going to get to revenue soon. They might raise more venture capital money. They're in Canada. The person who wants to come here is in Canada. Nobody in the company has paid themselves yet. They want to facilitate this individual to move from Canada to the US. Could this person be eligible for the H-1B lottery? Yeah, the payment requirements are for after the H-1B is approved. So as long as nobody was violating immigration status before by being underpaid, if nobody was being paid, it's not really a big deal if you have the money to pay for them and there's a real job. And for a Canadian professional, you should also look at the TN visa and maybe even an L1 in this situation, or an E2, or even potentially an O1. So this is a situation with a lot of possibilities. So definitely look at the H-1B lottery when you reach out to us, but we have a full-on candidate assessment that this individual should complete, and that will help us look at all of those options. All right. Okay, and then some recent updates. Historically, there have been some jobs that receive more scrutiny. We either try to just keep you out of these categories entirely, or we help set things up so that you can get approved. So that's part of what we do. We can get H-1Bs for people to work from home, to have multiple work sites. We can use these private wage surveys to establish that there's different wage requirements. So those things have been helpful to companies in the past. The US is moving towards proof of vaccination for all international visitors. So that's something to keep in mind, right?
Mhm.
Okay. And oh yeah, and then so there's two good things. So the State Department is very backlogged in terms of visas, but there are a lot of people where there's no interview being required from the consulates abroad. And then the pilot program that we did mention, we're waiting with bated breath to see when and how that will be rolled out. So we would love to help you. We did talk a little bit about the fees. It's $2,000. You need to hire us for any people today or tomorrow. Please reach out to us ASAP. Companies can hire us for the H-1B lottery. Job seekers cannot. So that's important to keep in mind as well. And yeah, here's a little bit more about our information. But I would say here, and my slide didn't refresh, unfortunately, but do contact us today or tomorrow. I do not know if we can keep accepting new cases for the next 8 days. We previously thought the final date would be March 1st, but we are pretty much nearing our capacity. And part of what we want to do is offer really excellent service to anybody who does hire us. So that has to necessarily include limiting how many clients we can accept. So with that, we did get 2 questions about families related to the H-1B. Somebody has a spouse who is a US citizen and they want to know if the H-1B lottery makes sense for them. So I'm just going to paint a picture here of an assumption. And if you need an individual consultation, please reach out to us. But let's say that a man who's not a US citizen is living in his home country with an expat US citizen wife, and the kids have passports and they're trying to figure out how to move to the United States for his work in the next few months, or how to live here permanently for the kids to, go to college here, for example. You could certainly do the H-1B for that husband, for his US company to sponsor him. And that may be the fastest way for the whole family to move here. Also, the wife could sponsor the husband for a marriage-based green card from abroad, but that's probably going to be a 2 to 4 year process based on current government processing times. So best would be to find a dual intent status like an H-1B or an L1 for husband to move here. Wife and kids don't need visas. They can just come here. And then as soon as you're in the United States, since it's a dual intent visa, wife can sponsor husband for a green card pretty immediately. And then we got another question about somebody whose kids are on DACA and whether their kids who are adults and pursuing higher education and working in various companies, if they could potentially be included in the lottery. This is once again a very individual analysis, I would say, that depends on when you came to the US, what your status was, if you had papers, how long you've been here, when you got DACA. If you traveled, if you got advanced parole and left and came in and you were considered admitted. So that's a nuanced situation, but each person in the family could complete our questionnaire and we'd be happy to take a look and see if there's anything we can do to support. So wonderful. I think that covers all of our questions, Lynda. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our attendees, names new and old. Thank you for being here today. We appreciate you. And Alex put out our recent podcast in the chat window, so you can listen to Lynda and my conversation there. And really the key takeaway for everybody would be, if you've already hired us, great. We are on track. We are doing your case. It's going to be done quickly and easily this year. And if you still need help, please let us know right away so that we can let you know if we have the capacity to accept your case. Any other parting words of wisdom for our attendees, Lynda?
I think you just captured it with that last statement, Sophie. Time is of the essence.
Yeah.
So, act now.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful
Thank
rest
you.
of your day. And thank you for being here. Bye-bye.
All right, take care.